Right now, President Trump is about to hold another key meeting at the White House with his national security team. He is considering, as we know, what action to take as Israel works to wipe out Iran's nuclear capabilities. And Israel needs our military to destroy the most impenetrable nuke site. That site is Fordow, built inside of a mountain. The Fordow enrichment site is just south of the capital city, Tehran. It's buried deep underground, about 300 feet into that mountain. Lawmakers on Capitol Hill are divided on whether the president should get the U.S. involved in this conflict.
I really think it's absolutely appropriate to use our capabilities to destroy the nuclear facilities in Iran.
The last thing we need is to be buffaloed into a war in the Middle East based on facts that prove not to be true.
When they chant death to America, that means that they get a nuclear weapon, they're not just willing to use it, they will use it. And so we have to be proactive.
The idea that one strike is going to be adequate, that it's going to be one and done, I think is a misconception.
I believe the president has full authority to do what he's talking about doing. He's talking about doing the right thing, which is to prevent Iran from having a nuclear weapon.
By the way, that Senator Barrasso interview this morning was excellent. So much information there. Senator Chuck Schumer confirmed a classified briefing on Iran for all senators planned for next week. Senator Eric Schmitt of Missouri is on the Senate Armed Services and Judiciary Committees. Great to have you today. So what do you anticipate these bipartisan conversations will go like?
Well, I imagine we'll get another briefing. We have been briefed sort of on the state of affairs, but I think it's important to point out, Harris, that things are changing on the ground all the time. Israel's made incredible progress. I mean, if you think about just, say, 3 years ago, the threats that they were facing through Iran's proxies, whether it's Hamas, Hezbollah, all of them have been wiped out. They effectively control the skies now in Iran. And you put that sort of, you zoom out a little bit with President Trump's visit to Saudi Arabia and the Middle East just last month, where he kind of laid out America's foreign policy. I think you'll see a resuscitation of the Abraham Accords, which were very productive. So I think there's a lot of opportunities moving ahead, but I trust President Trump on this. He's getting all the information in real time. He's in full command of his office, and he's sort of reoriented America's foreign policy. He's been very clear Iran shouldn't have a nuclear weapon. He's also been clear he's not for forever wars, and that kind of thing that we saw for 30 years with American foreign policy, just sort of wandering without any real intention. So I trust President Trump on this to make the right decision.
Here's how the American public is feeling about this whole thing. New Fox polling shows voters overwhelmingly think Iran poses a real national security threat to the United States. But they're split on Israel's decision to launch military strikes against Iran's nuclear facility. It also found 78% of voters say they are concerned about Iran getting a nuclear weapon. And I mean, that's a huge amount of people who at least agree on that point. So then the president has to say, okay, well, we've got that behind me. What are my actual choices at this point, Senator?
That's right. And he has a full menu of options in front of him. He's hearing from a team that he has assembled that he trusts. But ultimately, and I think what's kind of unique, and certainly in my lifetime post-Cold War, I have absolute confidence. This president's been very clear about Iran not having a nuclear weapon. He's also been clear, by the way, that he wants diplomacy to play out if it can play out.
Right.
I think that's one of the differences that you've seen with President Trump versus other presidents. He's driven by a realist point of view. You take the world as it is, and you make decisions in real time as things unfold, as opposed to sort of trying to nation build or do some of the things that the Wilsonians have tried to do over the past, 50 years. So I trust President Trump again. This is changing minute by minute in many ways, but the Israelis, should really be complimented. They've checked a lot of boxes of what they've wanted to do, and of course there's more to do, but it's been pretty remarkable.
Can I ask you a question? The IAEA had said that they saw one of the most problematic and risky moments in history occurring right around Iran just a short time ago. Yet they're at the UN and other places always saying how, well, we'll let those inspectors come out. I don't see a whole lot of push from them on Iran. Do we trust them if we can't take out Fordow, if President Trump decides we shouldn't get involved in that way? Do we trust them to go in and then keep an eye on what's left? Like, don't we get involved in that? What kind of a deal do you see happening with that?
Yeah, it's a great point, because I think, look, no matter what happens in this sort of moment, you know, it's not that difficult, sadly, and on the black market to purchase and acquire what you need to build nuclear weapons, right? And so I think wherever this goes, and why presidents, I think, tendency to be peace first and diplomacy first, which is the right approach, will lend itself to probably an inspection regime that's very different than the one that we've had before.
Thank
that
goodness.
Barack Obama, for example, just sort of said, yeah, we'll trust what you say. But I think that'll be very different moving forward with President Trump, which is another reason to be optimistic.
Absolutely. All right. Republicans tore into Democrats for boycotting that U.S. Senate hearing yesterday on former President Biden's cognitive decline and the alleged cover-up. Senator, you were in the room. Let's first take a look at this.
Not a single Democrat is here today because not a single one of them gives a damn about the fact that they lied to the American people for 4 years.
We need to know who was in charge during the last months of the Biden administration. Was it his wife, his chief of staff, nameless others?
Did Joe Biden actually assent to the use of the auto pen and all? You think of all the people he pardoned, he granted clemency to, murderers, drug dealers, child rapists. Let's find out, did he actually authorize it?
This de facto boycott is not just a refusal to participate. It's a refusal to serve the American people who deserve answers about who is truly leading their government.
Former White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer was a witness at that hearing, and he wrote this opinion piece titled, "I was Trump's press secretary. Any White House official worth their salt would see Biden's decline." Okay, so you started the day, I think Senator Durbin was there. Welch actually stuck around for a little while. Talk to me about this absence and what you think it means.
Yeah, so I actually co-chaired the committee. I'm the chairman of the subcommittee on the Constitution and the Judiciary Committee. So we called the hearing along with the Senator Cornyn. And the Democrats refused to call any witnesses, interestingly. That's very unusual. It's sort of an acknowledgement that this was not terrain, I suppose, they wanted to have a debate on. And then there were no Democrats on that side of the dais at all after Senator Durbin gave a brief remarks and Peter Welch. So it's very bizarre, but I think it's very telling that they wanted to ignore that hearing, much like they wanted to ignore Biden's mental decline. And we have to remember, Harris, it wasn't just that they were ignoring it at the time. They actually wanted him to serve another 4 years. They wanted him to be, again, sort of a puppet to these left-wing radicals that were running the White House, that opened up our borders, that had all this crazy inflation, that had a wandering foreign policy. He wasn't in charge. Everybody could see it with their own eyes. And so they wanted him to have another 4 years until, of course, the debate. They couldn't run from it anymore. Then they installed Kamala Harris, and we know what happened after that. President Trump won, thank God. But it's just, we can't let this happen again. The American people, I can't tell you, Harris, you spent some time in Missouri. How many Missourians have come up to me over the last few years and said, who was actually running the country?
Yes.
Like, it's a reasonable question. And that is kind of important in our constitutional order because it's the only person that's elected by the entire country. And when that person signs a treaty or a law or a pardon or a commutation, like, that carries the weight of the American people. That's how we've set up our government. So when you have someone who gets lost going to the bathroom or can't string sentences together, it's a real problem, and it can't ever happen again.
Yeah, and I understand why the president is focused on the auto pen, just from the way that you laid it out. By the way, Missouri, the show me state, they want to see the facts. Great to see you. Thank you.
You too.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.